Vivian Harper knew something was wrong the moment the champagne toast stalled. The upscale restaurant in downtown Augusta had been filled with laughter just seconds earlier. Glasses raised, forks paused mid-air, proud smiles aimed at Elena Harper, the guest of honor in her graduation gown. Then Thomas Harper cleared his throat. He didn't look at their daughter. He didn't look at Vivian either. Instead, he lifted his glass higher, like a man bracing himself for applause. "I've decided to start a new life," Thomas announced. The words landed heavy and misplaced, like a dropped plate that refused to shatter. Conversation died instantly. 50 sets of eyes turned, waiting for Vivian to react, waiting for tears, for shouting, for humiliation. She felt Elena stiffen beside her, fingers tightening around her napkin. Vivian inhaled slowly, steadying herself. After 28 years of marriage, she recognized the sound of a man choosing spectacle over decency. Vivian smiled. "Congratulations on your honesty," she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. Thomas blinked, clearly thrown off. This wasn't the reaction he'd planned. Vivian reached into her handbag and withdrew a cream-colored envelope, sealed neatly, prepared long before this moment. She placed it beside his plate with deliberate care. "What's that?" he asked, his confidence wavering. "Something you should read later," she replied. Then she turned to Elena, kissed her cheek gently and whispered, "I am so proud of you. This day is still yours." Vivian rose, smoothed her dress, and addressed the stunned guests. "Please enjoy your meals. I wish you all a lovely afternoon." Without another glance at Thomas, she walked out. The restaurant door closed behind her, sealing off the murmurs, the whispers, and the life she had already outgrown. The Georgia heat greeted Vivian like liberation. She welcomed it. For the first time in years she could breathe. Behind her, the restaurant door flew open. "Vivian!" Thomas shouted, his voice sharp with panic. "What did you do?" She didn't stop walking. The envelope contained the beginning of the end. Divorce papers, financial evidence, and a reminder Thomas had forgotten. The prenuptial agreement he once insisted on. While Thomas had been planning his escape with Lauren Pierce, Vivian had been tracing money trails, documenting betrayals, and consulting attorneys. She had always been the practical one, the saver, planner, the woman who delayed her dreams so others could chase theirs. And now she was finally done waiting. Vivian drove through familiar streets without really seeing them. The oak-lined avenues of Augusta blurred past her windshield as Thomas's voice echoed faintly in her mind. Not the frantic shout outside the restaurant, but the confident tone he'd used moments earlier, when he thought he held the power. She turned onto their street and pulled into the driveway of the colonial home she had helped pay for inch by inch. The house stood calm and dignified, just as it always had, unaware that its foundation had already shifted. Vivian sat in the car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, allowing herself one controlled breath. This was not an escape. This was a return to herself. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. Family photos lined the hallway. Elena's childhood drawings were still framed near the stairs. The grandfather clock, inherited from Vivian's father, ticked steadily in the living room. She moved through the space slowly, as though walking through a memory museum. Upstairs, she opened the master bedroom closet. Thomas's suitcases were hidden behind winter coats, already packed. Shirts folded with military precision. Shoes lined up neatly. Vivian smiled faintly. He had always been predictable in the ways that mattered least. Careful with appearances. Reckless with loyalty. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from friends, missed calls from Thomas's sister Margaret, and several frantic texts from Thomas himself. Vivian ignored them all except one. "Okay. This isn't your burden," she texted Elena. "Enjoy your graduation day. We'll talk tonight. Love you." She had protected her daughter for months, absorbing the betrayal alone so Elena could finish her final semester without distraction. That choice hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Vivian knew the truth would hurt either way. At least this way, Elena had crossed the stage free. 3 hours later, the front door slammed. Vivian. Thomas's voice carried anger now, edged with disbelief. Vivian was seated at the dining table, her laptop open, reviewing documents calmly. She closed it as he stormed in, waving the envelope like a weapon. "You served me divorce papers today," he demanded. "On our daughter's graduation day." "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans," Vivian replied evenly. "You wanted a new life. I'm simply not standing in the way." "You had no right," Thomas snapped. "I had every right," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "The prenup expired years ago," Thomas said suddenly, confidence returning. "Any lawyer would tell you that." Vivian allowed herself a small, knowing smile. Section 12 states the fidelity clause remains valid for the duration of the marriage. His face drained of color. "You didn't even consult a lawyer, did you?" she asked gently. Thomas collapsed onto the couch. "You're cold," he muttered. "After everything we built together." "We did build something," Vivian said. "You're the one who decided to burn it down." His phone buzzed. He ignored it. "Lauren?" Vivian asked softly. Thomas looked away. "I recorded your conversations," Vivian continued. "Not the affair. Just the plans. The money. The announcement." "That's illegal," he snapped. "Not in Georgia," she replied. Silence fell heavy between them. Vivian stood, lifting her overnight bag. "You have until tomorrow evening to remove your belongings. After that, the locks will be changed." "Where are you going?" he asked weakly. "Margaret's," she said. "She knows everything." That broke him. "My own sister," Thomas whispered. "She saw you last Christmas," Vivian replied. "You promised her it meant nothing." He paused at the door. "Don't use Elena to shield yourself. You weren't thinking of her when you planned this." As she stepped outside, Thomas's phone buzzed again. This time he answered. Vivian didn't hear the words, but she heard the panic in his voice. She smiled to herself. His carefully crafted future was already unraveling. Margaret Harper's bungalow sat quietly near the university, shaded by tall pecan trees. When Vivian arrived, the porch light was already on. Margaret opened the door without a word and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I heard," she said softly. Vivian exhaled. "I'm okay. Better than I thought I'd be." They moved into the kitchen where a bottle of wine waited, already opened. Margaret poured 2 glasses. "He humiliated you," she said, anger flashing in her eyes. "In front of Elena. In front of everyone." "He tried to," Vivian replied. "He miscalculated." 20 minutes later, Elena arrived, still wearing her graduation dress. Her makeup was smudged, eyes swollen from crying. She crossed the room and folded into Vivian's arms like she had when she was little. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena asked, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to ruin this moment for you," Vivian said. Elena pulled back, anger replacing tears. "Dad already did that." They sat together while Vivian told her everything. The affair, the hidden accounts, the prenup. Elena listened silently, jaw clenched. "I knew something was wrong," she said finally. "I just didn't want to see it." Vivian's phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Brooks, her attorney. "Emergency filing approved. Counts frozen." She showed the screen to Margaret and Elena. "Good," Elena said firmly. Vivian nodded. "He'll have access to enough to live. Nothing more." For the first time that day, she felt something close to peace. The doorbell rang. Margaret stiffened. "It's him." Thomas entered moments later, with Lauren Pierce trailing behind him. Lauren looked uncomfortable, eyes darting around the room. "Vivian, this has gone far enough," Thomas said. "Unfreeze the accounts. We can talk like adults." Elena stood up. "You should have tried that before you embarrassed my mother." Thomas blinked. "This doesn't involve you." "It involved me the moment you chose today," she replied. Lauren touched Thomas's arm. "Maybe we should go." "No," he snapped. Not until she fixes this. Vivian remained seated. Controlled. The accounts remain frozen until the hearing, she said. 3 days. Thomas's face twisted. What am I supposed to do? You have your private account, Vivian said evenly. Lauren turned sharply. Private account. The silence said everything. Leave, Margaret said firmly. Thomas hesitated, then looked at Elena. Relationships change, he said weakly. Elena's voice was steady. Stealing from your family isn't change. It's betrayal. That ended it. Thomas left without another word. Lauren followed, no longer holding his hand. The hearing took place on a rainy Tuesday. The judge reviewed the prenuptial agreement carefully. This document is valid, she said. The fidelity clause remains enforceable. Thomas's attorney shifted uncomfortably. The freeze remains in place, the judge continued. Mrs. Harper retains possession of the home. Vivian didn't look at Thomas as she walked out. She didn't need to. The fallout came quickly. Friends distanced themselves. Deals Thomas had promised Lauren fell through. 2 weeks later, Margaret called Vivian, unable to hide her amusement. She moved out, she said. Vivian wasn't surprised. Illusions collapse when exposed to numbers. Vivian rented a small office downtown and finally launched the consultancy she had postponed for decades. Women came to her scared, confused, desperate for clarity. Vivian gave them what she had once lacked: knowledge and control. The work fulfilled her in ways her old life never had. Elena visited often, proud and protective. You're different, she said once. Vivian smiled. I finally stopped shrinking. They laughed together, healing in shared honesty. The final divorce hearing fell on what would have been their 29th anniversary. The judge upheld the agreement in full. Thomas left with his personal belongings and little else. Vivian left with her future intact. Outside the courthouse, Thomas approached her one last time. I made a mistake, he said quietly. Yes, Vivian replied. I hope you find happiness. She met his eyes. I already have. 6 months later, Harper Financial Transitions was thriving. Vivian hired 2 associates. Her days were full. Her nights peaceful. She had stopped defining herself by what she endured. The envelope Vivian had placed beside Thomas's plate that day had never been about revenge. It had been a boundary, declaration, and a key. On the other side of the door was not bitterness, but reinvention. And for the first time in her life, Vivian Harper stepped forward entirely on her own terms.